Good morning, everyone. I'm Kyra, and today I'm interviewing Jillian Bishop, an urban seed farmer who owns her own business called Urbantomato, which works towards growing our local supply of heirloom seeds. Through local community activities such as Seed Sundays and seed-saving workshops, and offering curated collections of heirloom seeds that are grown in her own personal garden, she's able to educate others and share her knowledge on the subject. This interview is one step closer to sharing knowledge and spreading awareness about the countless occupations in the not-so-mainstream industry of food. I'm so glad to have you here today and can't wait to learn more about what it takes to be an urban seed farmer.
Thanks for having me.
Could you give me a basic idea of what your business is about and what role you play in your business?
So it has sort of a dual mandate of growing high-quality heirloom seeds, as well as educating people on how they can grow and save their own seeds. A little bit about processing and growing sort of locally adapted seeds in an urban environment, but then also really focused on giving people the knowledge to grow and save their own seeds as well and share them with others in the community. I guess I'm the sole business owner, but I try to always work with others in that capacity as well.
What got you interested in this line of work?
I guess it was many, many years ago when I graduated from university. I have my degree in Indigenous Environmental Studies, and it was a little bit doomsday-y at times. And when I graduated, I started working on farms, and one of them taught me how to save seeds. And it was sort of just like a light bulb went off, especially the very first time I grew a striped Cavern tomato from seed I saved, and it came true. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it seemed just like a positive act of resistance, like something you can do that feels like it's having an impact, and don't get so bogged down by how scary the environmental news can be.
It's amazing because I had the same light bulb go off when I went through your website. I was like, what are heirloom seeds? I never heard of those.
Oh, that's awesome.
Me and my mom try to grow them, grow normal seeds, but they never work. So I think we're just doing something wrong.
Oh, like they don't germinate.
I think so. I don't know. We're very new. We don't really do much research.
Well, that's okay. That's a big part of the education is lots of people are new to it, and even more people are getting interested in it all the time. So
what are some of the most enjoyable parts of your occupation? What are some things you wished you knew prior?
Well, I do really like working with others. So, teaching kids or even folks like yourself that are new to it, how to garden. To grow good seed, you have to grow food. And so you're learning how to garden while you're doing it. But I think when you're saving seeds, you get to see the full life cycle of the crops that you're growing. Often with like a broccoli or a lettuce, you cut it off and enjoy it, and that's great. But when you're saving seeds, you watch it go flower, and that brings a lot of new pollinators to your gardens, and you just get to learn about the plants. I always sort of feel like I'm just kind of watching them do their thing and helping them along the way. Whereas as a market gardener, you'd have to be picking lettuce every week and then sort of keep on top of it. So I think that, it just makes you feel like you're sort of part of that life cycle and helping the plants. What did I wish I knew before? My business just sort of grew as I kind of went with it. So at the time, a lot of people didn't know what heirloom seeds were. They're sort of looking at me like, why are your tomatoes black? This doesn't make any sense. And when I first started, I did not have any property. I didn't even know how to drive. And so over time, I sort of made friends with farmers. Honestly, I wouldn't change that. If I had known this is where I would end up, that would be great, I guess. But I think the evolution was sort of part of learning and a good part of it. So I always learned something new every year that I was doing wrong or that I could do better. And that's just sort of part of the nature of gardening, for sure.
You're always learning from everything about you. The next question is, what does a day in your life look like as an urban seed farmer with your own business?
Well, it really depends on the time of year. I would say to some degree, seed saving is a full year-round activity. I do also have multiple other jobs that I work at not-for-profit, so it's often sort of, couched within all those other things that I'm doing. But right now, for example, it's harvest season, so that's great. Everything's starting to come out of the garden. The seeds are starting to ripen, so I'm collecting things, I'm drying seeds, I'm sort of getting ready for the actual processing of them, and it's the exciting time of year where you get to see that you're actually going to get a harvest from everything that you've worked on. So it's kind of the dream time of year in a seed saver's world, but it's also very busy because, I have a table full of tomatoes in 38-degree weather are not going to last too long. So I got to make sure I squeeze the seeds out and get that all going. So it's a sort of constant keeping with the cycle of the plants and wherever they are at.
Great. So to jump jump into some more specific aspects of your job, what is the basic idea of heirloom seeds?
Well, the basic idea of heirloom seeds, which some people would also call open pollinated, is that as long as you practice the proper techniques for seed saving, you will get the same seed, which people would call true to type, year after year. So that means that if you really like your purple tomato, or you have, seeds that were passed down through your family, or something that's a rare and unique variety, you can have confidence that you can get the same variety each year. But with that is also this idea that they adapt over time. So for example, in my urban backyard, I know I could get that striped cavern tomato every year, but every year it also evolves to the strange and changing weather patterns that we have. So this year, for example, was a cold, kind of wet July. Now it's super hot August. And so they sort of have that in their tool belt. And every year kind of they learn something new, and they may not always need it, but they sort of have it as a history. So it's half that you're keeping things, true and the same, but also that they're alive. They're a living seed bank. And every year they sort of learn and adapt to something new. I tell my customers, because they're heirloom seeds growing in my backyard, I know they'll do well in theirs because most of them are small scale.
Yeah, when I was doing my research, that was the most fascinating aspect, that they adapt to whatever weather, because they've retain all the knowledge from whatever the weather is, whatever the conditions are, and they take it along, so that they're not gonna get spoiled, or they're gonna give you the same result. That was very interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. And a lot of our seeds are grown in California. So, growing them here in Peterborough, I know they adapt to this region, to Ontario, even to sort of general kind of geographic area, and then very specifically into the backyards as well. So they are pretty smart little beings for sure.
I looked to your website and I saw that you do many local community activities with a lot of the communities around you, like seed Sundays and seed saving workshops. What happens there, and what kind of knowledge do you tend to spread?
So yeah, the seed saving workshops are usually seasonal. So a lot of them I would do in the fall. Well, I guess I would start in the spring because not to get too deep into the biology, but seeds can cross. So two tomato varieties, for example, need to be kept apart or they can get cross-pollinated.
Wow.
So I try to teach people in the spring, if they want to save seeds, there are some things that you can plan for and able to do that in the fall. And then in the fall, it's a lot of the hands-on, like how do you even find a lettuce seed? Do you know where that's growing? This is what it looks like. This is how we would pick it. This is how we would clean it. So just teaching people really hands-on practical skills, which for the last year I've done over Zoom, which does make it a little more challenging to get that sort of, textile. But I'm always trying to just get people interested. Just think about, a lot of gardeners don't necessarily even know where their seeds come from. Like if you ask them where you would find a lettuce seed on a plant, they may actually have no idea, which is totally understandable. So getting people to think about that and trying to just sort of spark that interest, get people that are more engaged in it and want to save some seeds. Those are pretty small scale. We try to do them in gardens or in places where they can, help clean the seeds or pick or do those sorts of pieces. And then Seedy Sunday is sort of a different beast. It's like every year. Again, we had to go online last year, but it's in the spring and it brings together seed sellers from around the area. And it's a show in which people can come and purchase seeds. They're all locally grown, as much as Ottawa, Toronto, sort of general area. They'll get to meet the farmers and get to know that they are buying seed that is locally adapted and that is heirloom and organic. And then we have community groups come and some workshops as well. So it has an educational component. Our first one, I think we had 50 people. And then when we got to our 14th year, we had over 2,000 people come. So for a town of 7,200 people, that's a lot of people coming to buy heirloom seeds. So just trying to encourage people to, everyone's into knowing where their food comes from, but to think further about where your seeds come from and purchasing directly from those farmers.
That's great. 2,000 people.
I know, it's a bit wild. We actually had to cancel it 2 days before the 2001 because that's when everything changed. So it was a bit heartbreaking because it's a big sales for a lot of farmers, and there's a seed swap area too. So people come and trade seeds. Yeah, so we've just sort of been evolving. I don't know how much bigger it would have gotten if we'd met in person in the last couple of years, but people are pretty into gardening. So I imagine even bigger.
I think during quarantine, people started getting more into it because people around me themselves go into their house and I just see like a garden, what happened? You're like, we just got a board we wanted to pick up from the hobby. I was like, that's great.
Yeah, for sure. It's like something you can do at home. And then I also think this feeling of self-sufficiency, like, oh, this is what it felt like not to be able to go to the grocery store or to be worried about where my food came from. And so it motivates you to think like, you're probably not feeding yourself off a small backyard garden, but at least you're getting some food and feeling good about that.
Well, what are some ways people can start to save seeds?
Well, I mean, even with gardening, I tell people to grow what they like to eat. And for seed saving, I would say something similar, grow a crop that interests you. Maybe if you happen to have some seeds or something in your family that's really important to your culture or your community, something that you feel connected to. So, it could be any number of crops, but something that you're going to feel committed to sort of seeing through. It could be something you find now hard to find in a seed catalog, or that you're increasingly see as a bit rarer or harder for you to be able to find those seeds. And then depending on your experience, there are some seeds that are super easy. So if you're just getting started, I tell people to start with beans or peas or even tomatoes, because you'll sort of have this feeling of success. It's a little bit easier to do. Carrots are an extensive process, and I probably wouldn't tell a new seed saver to start with carrots unless it was something they were deeply passionate about. So a little bit about what will be accessible and make you feel a sense of reward, but then also that you're going to feel this connection to and feel a purpose for why you want to save those seeds.
Yeah, I get that. What kind of education did you require for this job, and what fields of study can actually help you become, or other people who are interested in this job, become an urban seed farmer?
Well, I mean, I do have my degree in Indigenous environmental studies, but we didn't do a lot of hands-on agriculture through that. I would say my education has been through Seeds of Diversity, through meeting farmers, through taking part in other workshops, through the garden itself. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but your seeds are teachers, they're showing you something all the time. So just continually learning from everyone around you. And there have been many a times I've gone to workshops with mentors of mine and been like, oh, I was totally doing that wrong. I think just sort of humbling yourself to accept you'll probably never know everything. And sometimes the more you know, the less you realize you do. So you may now be able to get a more formal education in urban agriculture than I could at that time, but I don't know if it would ever replace that sort of hands-on experience of either doing an internship where you may work directly with a farmer, or even just continue that sort of like lifelong learning of knowing other seed savers and sharing knowledge and resources as well. For the community building component, I think some kind of community development or an education that helps you understand complicated dynamics of working with community could be valuable for sure.
Great. So learning from nature.
Yeah, she's a great teacher, that's for sure.
Why should young people consider a career like yours? Because it's not as mainstream, and because I am a high school student, my sister is applying for colleges, and food industry jobs are not as mainstream or as big of an option in those studies. Why should people consider a career like yours?
Well, not for the millions, I'll tell you that much, but I think it does provide a bit of a sense of hope. As I sort of alluded to at the beginning, you're doing something, you feel like the weight of the world can be a bit overwhelming, particularly, not to put that on you, but as a high school student in this time, it's got to feel a bit overwhelming. It feels overwhelming for me as an adult. And so when you are doing something like growing food or saving seeds or engaging with your community, you see that positivity, you see that you can make an impact. Everybody has to eat. Our food systems in the mainstream are a little bit of a mess, and there is a window cracking in which people are starting to understand that is going to be a massive process for positive change. And so if you feel like, the world's going to be an apocalyptic nightmare by the time I'm 40, growing food or saving seeds not only gives you a sense of hope, but can help ripple out to people around you. And to some degree, that sovereignty or self-sufficiency for yourself and your community is very positive as well. I mean, if you don't have seeds, you can't eat. You can't really grow any sort of community or society. And so it is sort of the foundation of it all. And I do think it's a growing industry because people have started, through COVID or even prior to that, more people wanting to grow their own food, more people wanting to learn about it. And so whether you're at the sort of farming scale or the community development or somewhere in between, I do think it's a growing industry that people will either do it for, again, just self-sufficiency for themselves or their family, or for a career connected to it.
It's actually very much like the people of like the generation before us. It's like, okay, we've done our damage. Now it's your job to do it. And then you're just like sitting there like, wait, what? Like, how are we supposed to figure out what to do? It's like as children or like as even like young adults, you're like, what do I do to do my part? So I get where you're coming from, or you feel a little more like calm down. You're like, okay, I'm doing what I need to do.
I sleep a little better at night knowing I have a seed bank. I'm not pretending it'll solve all the problems, but many people tell me I'm on their zombie apocalypse team because I have a huge seed bank and a giant canning cupboard. So, even that, you're like, okay, I can feed myself, I can take care of myself and those that I love. And that is helpful for sure.
It's a valuable lesson to learn.
Yeah.
What advice can you give young people who are either starting a job in the food industry or interested in starting?
I would say, connections, like talk to people. Don't be afraid to see if you can intern or help out or volunteer or find ways to, whether online or in person, go to workshops and meet people, because there are a lot of knowledge holders out there that you can really open yourself to. And seeds themselves are naturally abundant. Often you could get thousands of seeds from one plant. And I feel seed savers sort of reflect that. They're willing to share their knowledge if people are willing to ask. And so you could probably read a million books about seed saving and it wouldn't teach you as much as chatting with someone who's done it for some time or actually getting your hands in the dirt and doing that. So I think if it is something you're interested in, it's a good idea to take those chances. And as I said, like I didn't have any land to start with, and I was always amazed how many people would offer me land if you just sort of, it sounds very cliche to just say like, oh, you just put it out there that that's what you're looking for. Now I live in Peterborough where there is quite a bit of land, and so that is easier than maybe someone who might live downtown Toronto for sure. But, just sharing that interest, and a lot of the time people will be quite generous with their knowledge, especially if you're willing to help out with some of the work involved in it.
I was so surprised when I was reading through the information that there is something called community gardens, and it's like a very big thing where people can just come and like plant their like seeds and everything. I was like, that's a thing. This like I thought it was just like people in their backyards keeping their tomatoes to themselves.
Oh yes, so that's my day job, in which I help people start community gardens through a not-for-profit, and we do seed saving in community gardens. Some can be challenging because of the distances, but we definitely like to show people that no matter where you are, you can grow food and you can save seeds, whether it be on a balcony or a 10-acre farm. So I think that's really important for people to understand, because it can feel like, oh, I don't have a backyard, I guess this isn't for me, but there are lots of other opportunities. And again, a 10 by 10 garden plot, you're not growing enough food for your whole family, of course, but it's just sort of that experience that can be helpful.
So what kind of change would you like to see in our local and global food systems?
I mean, that's a big question. I do think it's sort of a twofold. I guess we have this huge industrial agriculture system, which is not working. It's destroying the planet pretty quickly. So to get people to get back to the sense of localized agriculture in places when people can save their own seeds, and they do focus on seasonality and really valuing the work of the farmers. So I think that's important, understanding you might not be able to eat watermelon 365 days a year if you live somewhere in which it's cold, learning to preserve, learning to save your own seeds and those components. But then even within that system, I think, there's a movement towards understanding that a lot of this knowledge is from Indigenous people, and that there are a lot of BIPOC communities who the land has been taken from, and that people just feel like, oh, well, this knowledge I can take too. And I think there's a movement in which people need to really understand, like, I wouldn't be a seed saver if Indigenous people in this area did not save seeds for a long time. And so at a localized level, I think there's more respect and understanding of the importance of people having equal access to land and that knowledge sort of being respected, as opposed to sort of like a bunch of white middle-aged guys being like, I learned about permaculture and now you should learn from me. So I think there's a reckoning happening on like two sort of parallel levels, that like, yes, we need to like go local and support all of those things. But then understanding even local agriculture is relying on migrant farmers, and like there's just, a justice component that needs to come with all of this access to food. And if only rich white people can afford heirloom vegetables, then we're not doing something right. So I think there's sort of two pieces to that. Like, yes, localize it, but then also make sure that everybody has access to those communities, if that's something that we're going to be promoting.
Definitely. I mean, like for the longest time as like children, we don't learn about where our food even comes from. So for the longest time, I was like, wait, how did this like come into like existence? Like, how is this on my plate right now? Any change would you like to do in like this, like the school systems? Because like the organization that I'm working towards, their main goal is to basically give gardens to every schooling so that kids understand like what the value of like growing food and what local grown food is. Any changes that you would like to make in our normal system? Because I never really knew where our food came from until like middle school, maybe when I started questioning it. I was like, what is this? What is this broccoli? Like, where did it come from?
And I mean, that's part of it, right? It's from the grocery store. You go there and there it is. So, I mean, I think exactly what you're saying. Kids need to grow food. They love it. Kids love to watch seeds sprout. Like, it's definitely a curiosity that's worth supporting. You know, I've never ever worked with kids that were like, I don't want to plant these seeds. This is dumb. You know, maybe a couple, but overall, if it's something they do from their youth, they're always like, more seeds, more seeds. So that, I think, just baseline, that's inherent in the curriculum. There should be gardens in every school. There should be, you know, opportunities for kids to grow food. I think part of it is what you're saying. You understand how it grows, where it comes from, but you also gain a greater respect for the people that do it as a career or as a larger scale. Like, we have a lot of community gardeners who will now shop at the farmer's market because they're like, oh my gosh, it took me so much to grow this one bowl of beans. I now understand, like, for you to grow a market table or a field full, that's a lot of work. And then I think the other component, at least here in Ontario, you know, the schools are out when most of the food would need the maintenance. And so just to say you have a school garden is not quite enough. And with the job I work with, we try to make those gardens like community gardens as well, so that you're bringing in the community, you're connecting that garden and the school with the wider community. And in a lot of places, schools are a huge land base that may not be available everywhere else. So, you know, what you're saying about, oh, I don't have any land, well, you know, at the school you're at, you might just. And so maybe you and your family could have a community garden plot or other members as well. So that component of understanding where your food comes from, growing it, and then also using it as a vehicle to sort of connect with the wider community.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me. This was actually one of my first interviews and it went so well.
Oh, good. Well, you did a great job. Those were great questions.
Thank you so much. Those are all the questions. You're off the hook.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you have a great day.
Thank you too. I hope the rest of your project grows really well. Be curious to hear about the others you talk to.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, you too. Bye.